I've noticed something pretty interesting after years of watching how people deal with their paychecks. A lot of people go through the same cycle every single month. The paycheck hits. The first few days feel calm and safe. And then somehow, as the month goes on, that tight feeling starts creeping back in. What's important here is this. They're not reckless spenders. They're not living some wildly extravagant lifestyle, and they genuinely want to save money. Yet the money still slips away, steadily, like there's some invisible force pulling it out. Most people assume the problem is discipline. Maybe I'm just weak. Maybe I'm not strict enough with myself. But when I really looked closely, I realized something else. The problem is rarely the person, it's the way money is placed into everyday life. And if you're getting paid regularly every month, you're actually in a very specific money mindset that most people never stop to notice. Main idea: a steady paycheck doesn't make saving easier. It makes you more careless. Here's the interesting part. When income arrives consistently, the brain starts treating money as a default constant, not as a resource that needs active attention. I've heard so many people say things like, "I get paid every month anyway. If I'm short, I'll make it up next month." And that thought creates a very quiet reaction. Spending doesn't feel like it needs much thinking. Small decisions stop feeling important, and saving quietly gets pushed into the later category. Nobody sits down and says, "Today, I've decided not to save." Instead, they say familiar things. "This week's been exhausting." "This month had a lot of unexpected stuff." "I'll start next month." A steady paycheck makes everything look safe, but it actually removes boundaries from money. You don't see money leaving because it leaves in tiny, reasonable, everyday ways. And the most dangerous part is this: you still feel like a responsible spender. Most people don't realize that saving doesn't fail because you spend too much. It fails because there's never a moment where money is forced to stop moving. Money just keeps flowing with the momentum of daily life. When there's no clear stopping point, saving always gets postponed. Not because you're bad with money, but because the system is quietly prioritizing everything else first. Main idea 2. Money doesn't disappear because of big decisions. It disappears because you make too many decisions while you're tired. I noticed something very paradoxical when watching everyday spending behavior. Very few people lose money because of one huge, terrible decision. Most people lose money through dozens of tiny decisions made when they're already drained. A normal day looks like this: a rushed morning, a packed workday, constant mental effort. And at night, all you want is for things to be simple. That's when money starts moving faster, not because you want to spend, but because you want to stop thinking. Let's just get the more convenient option. It's only a little extra. This time doesn't really count. Each of those sentences sounds reasonable, and on its own, each one barely matters. The problem is that the human brain is terrible at noticing repeated costs. It reacts strongly to big, painful expenses, but small, familiar, recurring ones, those get treated as part of normal life. Most people don't realize that money flows fastest when you no longer have the energy to filter decisions. You don't spend because you're greedy. You spend because you're tired. And if every day you have to ask yourself, should I buy this? Should I save instead? Should I hold off? By the end of the day, money will always lose to exhaustion. That's why so many people feel this way. It's not that I don't understand saving. I just don't have the energy to do it right every single day. The issue isn't knowledge. It's that money is tied to your emotional state. When money only stays protected if you're alert and disciplined, it gets damaged very often. Main idea 3. Saving doesn't fail because of low motivation. It fails because money has no physical boundaries. I've noticed something many people overlook, even those who earn decent money. Their money isn't lacking purpose. It's lacking boundaries. Everything sits in one place, one account, one number, and a vague feeling of there's still money there. When money has no clear boundaries, the brain handles it in a very instinctive way. What you can see feels usable. What's easy to reach gets touched. What requires no effort gets less respect. Nobody thinks, I'm taking money from my savings. They think, there's still enough in the account. Humans are great at respecting barriers, but terrible at resisting things that are already open. You won't open a fridge if it's locked, but if it's slightly open, you'll glance inside, and suddenly it's open. Money works the same way. Most people don't realize that saving doesn't require strong willpower. It just needs to be slightly harder to touch. When you have to switch accounts, when there's an extra step, when you can't do it without thinking. That pause is where money gets protected. A lot of people say, I keep everything together for flexibility, but that flexibility usually only does one thing. It makes spending easier. Saving needs a very different feeling. The feeling of this isn't for right now. Not because it's forbidden, but because it belongs to a future version of you. When money has boundaries, you don't have to ask yourself every day whether to protect it. That decision was already made. Main idea 4. What destroys saving plans isn't surprise expenses. It's the ones you don't want to look at. I notice something strange when talking to people about saving. They often say, this month was ruined by unexpected expenses. I didn't see that coming. But when you look closer, most of those expenses aren't new at all. Maintenance, repairs, medical costs, gifts, family responsibilities. They don't happen every month, but they happen regularly over the year. The brain has a habit of labeling anything that isn't monthly as an exception. And once something is treated as an exception, it doesn't get prepared for. Most people don't realize that saving plans don't collapse because of big expenses. They collapse because of the feeling of being blindsided. That feeling is dangerous. It creates a quiet thought. What's the point of saving if I always have to dip into it? After a few rounds like that, trust in saving starts to break down. But the real problem isn't that saving doesn't work. It's that savings are being used to put out fires that should have been planned for in advance. When an expense is accepted as this will happen, the mindset changes completely. It's no longer a shock. It's just something being handled. Money doesn't feel like a loss anymore. It feels like completing a task. I've seen many people become far more stable financially just by changing how they view these expenses. Not because they earned more, but because they stopped panicking every time money left. Main idea 5. Emotional spending isn't wrong. Letting it roam without boundaries is. I noticed something important when looking at moments where money went off track. Most of those moments have nothing to do with real needs. They happen when people feel stressed, exhausted, empty, or in need of comfort. Money becomes the fastest way to create that feeling. What's interesting is that most people know they're spending emotionally, but they usually respond in one of two extreme ways. Either they say, whatever, I deserve this, or they say, I'm cutting this out completely. Both paths lead to the same outcome. The plan falls apart. Most people don't realize that emotional spending doesn't disappear when you ban it. It waits until you're weaker, then comes back stronger. When you remove all small sources of comfort, life starts to feel controlled, and eventually you don't spend because of the thing you're buying. You spend to escape that trapped feeling. What works much better is this: giving emotional spending a clear place. Not whenever it wants, but within limits you've already accepted. When enjoyment is planned, it stops breaking the system. It becomes part of it. At that point, money is no longer the enemy of emotion. It becomes a tool for emotion, without being allowed to steer the entire flow of money. Many people find that once they do this, the feeling of, I can't control my money, drops sharply, not because they feel less, but because emotions are no longer driving alone. At main idea 6, many people stop saving not because they lack money, but because they can't feel themselves moving forward. I noticed something very subtle when looking at people who used to save consistently and then suddenly stopped. They didn't stop because of a major crisis. They stopped during a completely normal period. No emergency, no job loss, just a loss of motivation. When I talk to them, I often hear things like, I've been saving for months, but nothing feels different. The money looks the same. Life feels the same. I'm not even sure this is doing anything. What's interesting is this: they're actually doing things right, but their brain doesn't register a reward. Humans are bad at waiting for distant benefits. The brain needs signals that say, you're moving in the right direction. The problem is that savings usually aren't used right away, don't create visible changes in daily life, and just sit there quietly. They're silent. Most people don't realize that saving is a process that produces almost no emotional feedback. You don't feel lighter right away. You don't feel happier right away. You mostly feel like nothing happened. And to the brain, nothing happened is easily interpreted as this isn't working. When there's no sense of progress, people slowly loosen their discipline. Just a little, then a little more, until saving disappears and they can't even pinpoint when it happened. What I've found works much better is making progress something you can actually feel. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just clear enough for the brain to recognize, oh, I'm moving forward. Once the brain sees progress, it naturally starts protecting the habit, not through force, but through attachment. Main idea. 7. Your income goes up, but life doesn't feel lighter because new money has no defined role. I've noticed a very common paradox among people who've been working for many years. Income slowly increases, experience increases, responsibilities increase too, but the sense of security doesn't. A lot of people tell me, it's strange. I earn more than before, but it still feels tight. I'm not struggling like I used to, but I always feel cautious. Here's the interesting part. More money does not automatically create safety. When income increases without a clear decision attached to it, new money simply gets absorbed into the current lifestyle. Slightly better spending, slightly more comfort, slightly more convenience. Each slightly makes sense. None of it is wrong, but combined, they quietly consume the entire raise. Most people don't realize that money only creates a sense of security when it has a specific role. If new money isn't given a name, life will name it for you. And life is very good at spending money. Very few people sit down and ask, what is this raise meant to do for my future? Usually, money just arrives, and life expands to meet it. The issue isn't upgrading your life. It's upgrading too quickly, too smoothly, before building a layer of safety underneath. I've noticed that people who actually feel lighter when income rises don't spend that differently from everyone else. The difference is this: they keep a portion of the new money away from everyday life. When income goes up but pressure doesn't, it's because some of that money isn't participating in daily living. It stays in the background, quiet, but it creates a feeling of support. Main idea. 8. People who keep money long-term aren't better at self-control. They need less of it. I've noticed something that's easy to misunderstand when looking at people who manage money well. On the surface, they look very disciplined, less impulsive buying, less complaining about money, less end-of-month stress. But when you observe closely, they're not fighting themselves as much as we assume. What's interesting is that they're not constantly asking questions like, should I buy this? Should I save instead? Should I spend this month or not? Those questions were already answered, not in their heads, but in how their money is structured. Most people don't realize that every time you ask yourself, should I spend this? You're putting money into an emotional battle, and emotions, as we know, rarely lose in the long run. People who manage money well usually don't keep money where it's easy to touch, don't make every purchase a fresh decision, don't allow money to sit in vague, undefined spaces. Once money has clear rules, willpower gets to rest. And when willpower rests, it doesn't wear down. A lot of people think, I just need to be stronger with money. But in reality, the more strength you need every day, the faster you burn out. Money shouldn't be something you're constantly resisting. It should run quietly in the background, even when you're busy, tired, or not at your best. I've noticed that people who succeed with money don't live more tightly. They live with less self-control required because control has been transferred to the system. Main idea, and Andre, financial plans don't fail because of big mistakes. They fail because no one adjusts them when they drift. I've noticed something very familiar when looking back at failed saving plans. They don't collapse suddenly. They drift slightly, then drift a bit more, until no one remembers they were ever on track. Life constantly changes, costs rise, new responsibilities appear. Things that mattered before matter less. Small things slowly take up more space, but many people's financial plans stay frozen. What's interesting is that the brain adapts very easily to small misalignments. Overspend a little this month. Make up for it next month, then overspend again. Each time feels justified. And because there's no big shock, no alarm ever goes off. Most people don't realize that a system that isn't checked will naturally drift toward convenience. And convenience usually means easier spending, more postponing, and fading savings. No one is trying to sabotage their plan. They just never come back to adjust it to who they are now. When a plan no longer fits, it starts creating discomfort. And humans naturally avoid discomfort, not because they're lazy, but because they're protecting themselves. I've seen many people improve their finances just by doing one small thing: reviewing their money regularly with a neutral attitude. No blame, no frustration, just asking, where is this drifting right now? When drift is corrected early, it never becomes a big problem. Saving stops being a fight. It becomes a flow that's gently guided back on course. Main idea 10. Financial stability doesn't come from perfection. It comes from not quitting when things look messy. I've noticed something important about people who actually keep money long term. They're not people who do everything right every month. They're people who don't turn one imperfect month into a reason to stop. A lot of people think, if I'm doing this, I should do it properly. If I miss the target, that's failure. And that mindset is exactly what makes them quit early. What's interesting is this: the human brain is very harsh toward failure, but strangely indifferent to slow progress. Saving less than planned for 1 month gets labeled as failure, but saving consistently for 10 months barely gets acknowledged. Most people don't realize that money doesn't need you to be better. It just needs you not to turn mistakes into self-judgment. When you treat each month as an experiment, not a test, your mindset shifts completely. You stop asking, did I do well this month? And start asking, what did I learn this month about how money actually works in my life? When that perspective changes, money stops being a measure of self-worth. It becomes a system that's slowly refined over time. The people who keep money long-term aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who don't abandon the system just because a phase doesn't look good yet. Financial stability doesn't arrive in a single moment. It arrives when you're calm enough to continue, even when the results aren't satisfying yet. Outro. If you get paid every month and feel like you understand saving, you've tried, but the money still doesn't stay where you want it to, then the problem may not be your effort. It may be that your money hasn't been placed into a psychological structure that matches your real life. You don't need to do everything in this video. You just need one change small enough that you won't quit. If this video made you recognize something familiar in yourself, hit like to support the channel. And if you want to keep going deeper into money psychology, wealth behavior, and building financial stability without forcing yourself, subscribe to the channel and join me in the next videos. Thanks for watching until the end.